You've probably heard of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Most people know it as one of America's most haunted places. But tonight, we're not telling a ghost story. No, we're opening a case file, digging into a real-world tragedy, a massive medical cover-up, and the secrets buried deep beneath the floors of this infamous hospital. So, where does this all start? Well, it all begins with a tunnel, one that was hidden, totally out of sight, and built for a single, really chilling purpose. 500 feet. That's the length of this thing, burrowing right from the heart of the hospital out into the world. Now, 500 feet, it might not sound like a huge distance, right? But it was more than long enough to hide something, well, something pretty much unthinkable. See, this tunnel, it wasn't for moving coal or supplies around. Nope. It was built for one reason and one reason only: to secretly move the bodies of the dead to get them away from anyone who was still alive. They had a name for it. They called it the body chute. And it was, this grim, engineered solution to a problem they were desperate to keep hidden. And what was that problem? An absolutely overwhelming number of people dying every single day. And this is where the lie gets just massive. Officially, it was just a simple utility tunnel for coal and supplies. But what was really going on? It was a conveyor belt for corpses. This is like Exhibit A in a huge cover-up, all designed to keep up this fragile sense of hope. So you gotta ask yourself, right? Why would they go to such horrifying lengths? Well, to get that, you have to understand the time. You have to understand the absolute desperation. See, Waverly Hills, it was on the front lines of a war against this terrifying disease that no one knew how to cure. It was called the White Plague, tuberculosis, and it was just this slow, agonizing death sentence. I mean, it literally rotted your lungs, hollowed you out from the inside. Back then, in the early 1900s, doctors had nothing. They were completely powerless. And when you're that powerless, well, that's when desperation leads to some really drastic and honestly brutal experiments. And get this, just as one example of how far they'd go, doctors would perform these experimental surgeries, often with no anesthesia. Can you even imagine? They would restrain a patient, surgically remove their ribs one by one, all just to expose the lungs to sunlight. It was basically butchery, just pure, utter hopelessness driving these horrific procedures. So what was the results of these experiments? A staggering 85% death rate. Let that sink in. 85%. People came to Waverly Hills hoping for a cure, and instead they got these torturous procedures that pretty much guaranteed they'd die. And at its peak, it wasn't one death a day. It was one person per hour. Think about that. Every 60 minutes, someone else was gone. The sheer scale of it is it's mind-boggling. The hospital wasn't just fighting a losing battle, it was practically operating a death machine. And that brings us right back to the body chute. That was their rationale. The management was convinced that if the patients who were still alive saw a constant parade of hearses leaving the front door, every bit of hope would just vanish. So what do? They decide to hide the dead. Literally, right under everyone's feet. Okay, so the cover-up was about hiding the sheer scale of the tragedy, but it wasn't just about the numbers. Inside those walls, individual stories, individual tragedies were being buried too. And there is no story more infamous or more mysterious than what happened in room 502. Alright, let's look at the timeline here because it is seriously chilling. First, 1928, a nurse just 29 years old, unmarried and pregnant, which, was a huge deal back then, is found hanged in room 502. The official story? Suicide. Okay, but then, just 2 years later, a second nurse falls or jumps to her death from the exact same window. Coincidence? Or is that something else? And that's really the heart of this specific mystery. So, the first death gets an official ruling, suicide. But the second one? It was never explained. Never. It just became another sad story in a building that was already overflowing with them. And it was all just quietly swept under the rug. Now, the story of room 502 is incredibly compelling, right? But it's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. The most damning evidence of a cover-up isn't in one room. It's in the hospital's own records. Or maybe I should say, the records that are missing. Just look at this. The official records we have say that about 63,000 people died at Waverly Hills. But local historians who have been digging through old records and other documents, their estimate is way higher. We're talking over 100,000. That is a massive gap. We're talking about tens of thousands of people who are just unaccounted for. And this right here is the question that just hangs over everything. Where are the records for tens of thousands of people? Did they just get lost somehow? Or, and this is the really sinister possibility, were they deliberately destroyed to hide just how bad things really were, to hide the true scale of the failure happening inside that place? So, you might think the story ends once they find a cure for TB, right? But it doesn't. The dark history of this building just keeps going, leaving behind this legacy of scandal and, you guessed it, a ton of unanswered questions. So once the antibiotics came along, the sanatorium finally closed in 1961. But then, it reopens just a year later as the Woodhaven Geriatrics Hospital. And wouldn't you know it, that place gets shut down in 1982 because of all these horrifying allegations of patient abuse. It's like tragedy was literally built into the foundations of the building. Which brings us to some final, really chilling questions. I mean, think about it. If the hospital administration was willing to lie about the death count, to go so far as to build an entire tunnel just to hide the bodies, what else were they hiding? So what really happened down in that 500-foot tunnel? Was it just a discreet hallway for the dead? Or is it possible that in their total desperation to find a cure, the body chute became a secret lab, a place for even darker experiments, far away from anyone who might be watching? The scary part is, we might never really know for sure. You know, everyone calls this place one of the most haunted spots in America. People talk about ghosts and seeing strange things. But honestly, the real documented history, the story of medical failure, of these awful experiments, of a massive cover-up designed to hide human suffering, that is so much more frightening than any ghost story could ever be. And Waverly Hills, it's one of those places. It's not just made of stone and steel. It was forged from the pain of tens of thousands of people, and all of it is held together by secrets that even after all this time are still fighting their way to the surface.